Welcome to another episode of the official Catchup. I'm Ben, and contrary to popular belief, I am not in the payroll of the Lowland League. I'm joined by, let's see, the inside hat-wearing duo that is Chris and Moza. Moza, the gatekeeper of non-league Scottish football on Twitter. How you doing?
I wish I got a pay rise for that, but I am good. How's you?
Not bad. We're recording on a Friday, so I'm pretty happy that it's Friday. And we're also joined by the guy who should do FM and not talk about Lowland League football. It's Chris. How you doing?
Yeah, good. I mean, I'm going to have to start wearing the hat all the time now, even when it's like summertime, because I think it's become such a, I don't know what the word is, I guess, a tool, if you will, for controversy. So, yeah, I'm just going to wear it all the time now. So...
Well, that's it. If you like a hat yourself, official Catchup snapbacks will be in the merchandise store very, very soon. Just before we get into it, check out our sponsors, the Soccer Shop Direct. Check them out on Twitter at the Soccer Shop D, or check out their website www.thesoccershopdirect.com for all your teamwear and football equipment needs. Well, gents, it's been a bit of a week and a half, or in fact a week since we last spoke. Obviously, the first thing that we've seen happen is the vote in favour of Colts teams in the Lowland League. We as a podcast seem to take a bit of abuse for our last episode because we seem to kind of agree with the idea, and people were not as very pleasant, shall I say.
Aye. The first thing to be perfectly clear, because we will get called up for it, is it was just an indicative vote that's passed. The actual vote at the AGM is in less than 2 weeks now, isn't it? But I don't see any way that 3 clubs are going to change their mind, and it would need 3 clubs to change their mind to stop it happening now. So I'm pretty 99% sure that Old Firm Colts are going to be in for a year now into the Lowland. And I mean, we've had the chats in the background about this. I'm not bothered about the flack that's came in because it's an emotive issue. Some folk are just vehemently, we don't want Colts full stop, and I respect that view. The ones that I don't get are the ones that are, but it's clearly not going to be a year, or you can't trust them. It's like, well, they would need to vote on it again next year if it was going to be that way. Or, like, there's so many ifs and buts. You could use that argument for literally anything in football. It's like, but it will need just be a year.
Yeah.
Like, we all know, let's be honest, we all know the Old Firm's goal in this is to get in the League 2, to get in the SPFL with their Colts. That doesn't really have a bearing on this, I don't feel like. Like, they could say, we've proven ourselves in the Lowland, so stick us in the SPFL, but is that going to really change clubs in League 2's viewpoint? I don't think so. Though, I don't see this having much of an influence on their end goal.
Let's be honest, all our new fans from League 2 will be pissing their pants when they go into League 2 in 2 years' time. They'll get a shock when they find out that they'll end up in League 2. Chris, just a word on that from yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think we're calling this the aftermath. So I hope Dr. Dre doesn't sue us. We could write up a book on this escapade, to be honest. But hey, look, similar to Moza, I think the last time we had the podcast, I had a bit of personal abuse. So it's I did read something quite hilarious that the accusation was like, we're only talking about personal abuse and all this to deflect from the podcast and stuff, or the decision or the proposal. And I'm thinking to myself, hold on, someone's messaged me to square go me, and I'm thinking about fucking football proposals. I don't fucking think so. It's like, what?
The last time I checked, we didn't have a horse in the race either. Like, whether this passes or no. So it's absolute nonsense.
It was crazy, and I thought to myself, it's like, yeah, I'm trying to deflect away from a proposal because I'm getting, but as I said, square goad or the potential of that. Funny enough, the person actually deactivated their account. But hey, look, it's a motive subject, but I don't subscribe to the thought that certain people caused what had happened, because there was a lot of anger, and I can't directly blame certain individuals, but certainly I feel they didn't help, and I thought that was the most disappointing thing for me. But if you think you're gonna, if you think I'm the type of person that's going to be sort of bullied into anything over a message on Twitter, then you've got I'm not, you've not got the right person. I've been punched in the head and in the face many a times, and I'm not threatened by fucking messages over Twitter. So let's get that right for one. You know what I mean?
There's a reason he looks like he does, folks.
Where's the half for a reason? And that's it. I think from our perspective is that there's a lot of flack about we gave George an easy ride. Now, I just want to say something quite quickly on this point. What the fuck were you expect us to do? Like, we all know George, and we're in positive favour. We're in favour of the Lowland League, which we talk about all the time. It's a thing we like to champion. We couldn't come on this podcast and just be horrible to the guy. We invited him on. He was willing to talk to us. I don't think he didn't do many media interviews prior to the vote on Monday. I know he's done a few things prior to and after the vote, rather. But I mean, I don't know what you were expecting. There's a lot of garbage getting chucked about that were easy, were soft, all this kind of stuff. But I don't really know, what did you expect us to do at the end of the day? But I thought the episode we did, I thought was pretty good. It helped get a lot of detail out there that perhaps wasn't aware of many people, or not many people knew about. So a good episode, I think, for us. But I think the treatment online has just been a bit bullshit as far as I'm concerned.
One thing I would add to that, Ben, is a lot of people were like, I think it was mainly my responses. They were saying, oh, that's brilliant, mate, and that. But that's my general reaction, because I actually thought what he said made sense. And I do that with a lot of people, and it's not just George. I do that with yourself, Ben. I do that with Derek. If I agree with something, I'm going to be like, yeah, fair enough, you know. Was I satisfied with everything George said? No, but I understand, and he explained that the proposal's still in the early stages. So there was certain questions where I didn't feel I was satisfied with all the answers, but again, I'm appreciative of the fact that it was still at the early stages, like George explained. I mean, according to social media, you know, we're not the Gestapo, we're the Soviet propaganda. So, like, what did you expect? I thought we actually answered. I thought we asked all the questions that needed to be asked. I don't think we left anything out. Were we a wee bit too soft? Well, you know, that's up for people to decide themselves. But I don't think we're ever going to have anyone on and just absolutely berate them or badger them if we disagree with them, because that's what's good about either a debate or a wee bit of a civil conversation. We're not here to absolutely annihilate people because we disagree with them. We're here to hear people out, put our questions to them, like we did with George, and get answers. If we're not satisfied with them, then we'll go back. But it's a weird one. But yeah, I did laugh at the Russian. I can't remember what the word used was, but the Russian propaganda thing. It's like
KGB or something that was mentioned.
We'll get more into it a wee bit later in the podcast. But it's like, I think I made it perfectly clear that I was on the fence. I said it more than once. So, and there's going to be a wee bit of a swerve later as well. But I mean, how fucking clear can you get? And I'm sorry for swearing so many times, but it's one of those issues that I'm becoming a motive because other people are a motive.
Yeah.
And when I get personal abuse, then obviously I'm going to defend myself there as well.
This is easily the most emotive issue that's ever came up since the Lowland League was formed. And the thing about it is, one, we are no journalists. Mm-hmm. I'm personally quite proud of that episode. I think we did a really good job with it, because obviously folk that were angry with the proposal wanted us to basically Paxman style interview George, and that was never going to happen in this podcast. But what we did in the way we spoke to George was get more information that has never been heard. Before that podcast, nobody knew what was in that innovation paper that keeps getting talked about. Now we know it's an expansion of League 2 with the Old Firm Colts in it. And there's a few other details came out, like George was mentioning long-term, his idea of the Lowland League 2, which I feel like now that we've listened back and watched back, he is talking about us tier below the Lowland League rather than East and West. But these are little things little nuggets of information that wouldn't have came along if we'd basically sat him down, put the mastermind light on him and gone, right, speak, Answer for your crimes. But as Ben says, we are, like, all three of us are passionate about non-league football, and we're passionate about the leagues, and we are going to naturally do our best to promote and kind of put the league in a good light. This is slightly different as an issue, as a proposal. I deliberately took a step back in that podcast, being involved with BSC Glasgow as well, because I thought, obviously I had a wee bit of inside knowledge with the kind of motivations behind it and stuff, and I wasn't going to act as a cheerleader, because that's what people would have probably accused, but they still accused me, I guess.
No, it matter. It doesn't matter in the end anyway, you know what I mean?
It didn't matter in the end, exactly. But I feel like we covered all bases with him. I think reading through certain online forums confirmed that we covered most bases with him, because a lot of answers were quoting timestamps in the YouTube video. For answers that he gave, there was very little that wasn't covered in that or in the document that leaked out. So I think we did our job in that regard, and it's up to people to make their own minds up. But there's a line, and a lot of people crossed it over the last few days, and I'm very disappointed in certain people that I thought were better than that as well. I'll leave it at that.
I think let's just have the. I was going to say have the. You know, Chris, I'll take the final word on that point if you want.
I was just going to mention the fact that I do feel, although similar to yourself, that I kind of went to as well, where I was a wee bit disappointed in a few people that I have respect for. I do feel a lot of the stuff was from SPFL fans, and some of them I don't actually think they've ever been to a Lowland League game. And it's not to say that they shouldn't have a say either, but I think again, it comes back to this Rangers and Celtic thing, and there is a part of me that believes it is just because it's Rangers and Celtic, and there is such a hatred for them clubs. And I think that's where the SPFL fans come in that aren't really known to us or known to the podcast or even the league, that come in and have similar views. But I mean, for example, obviously we're saying about a forum there. I mean, it was like a massive circle jerk with these people with hatred and disapproval. It's like, what? It's like, I know you agree with each other, guys, but like, come on now, like, calm it down.
I mean, there's two valid reasons for fans of clubs in the SPFL to get up in arms about this. One, they're against B team full stop, because ultimately it is Rangers and Celtic who are getting a wee bit of favourable treatment. But the truth is, nobody else put their name forward for it. There were background discussions as far as we're aware.
Yep.
And I've seen Inverness Cali come up a few times because they were interested in Highland a wee bit back. They were not interested this time around, so that's a flawed argument. Aberdeen are the only club that mentioned they might have interest, and it didn't come to anything, and they would have been Highland anyway. St Mirren are another one that I'd quote, because I don't know if it was Jim Goodwin or possibly their chairman, but he basically said, look, maybe in a few years' time we'd look at it, but we've not got the money, don't we? And I feel like that's the case with most clubs. So indirectly, Rangers and Celtic are getting a benefit ahead of other clubs by being the ones that have got the money to go ahead and do this for a year. I get that. And the other reason I get is they want to get into League Two, and this could be used as evidence that it works, for example. But on the other side of the coin, if Rangers and Celtic Colts finish mid-table in the Lowland League, how can they then turn around and say we should be in League Two? Would be my counteract to that. So if they go and scoosh the league, fair enough, but I don't think they will. I think they'll be mid-table. Like, it's 2002s, with the exception of 2001. That's allowed to play in the squad. So
Andy Firth playing for Rangers.
Andy Firth canny. I haven't checked the rules. He's too old. So
I gutted for him.
And they're still going to send out the boys that deserve to be at a higher level on loan to a higher level to get the experience. So it's like, I genuinely don't think they'll push for the title or that. Well, obviously proof will be in the pudding, but I get the valid reasons, but at the same time, there's some absolute nonsense getting peddled as well, and it deserves to be called out.
Just to have the final word, I think as well, to remind people, we are guys who do this for free. We don't make any money out of this. We don't do it to make money, or it's not a job. We've all got jobs and lives and do our own thing and things like that, but it's not something. Whereas, take an example of someone like maybe Keith Jackson. I'm sure he's had plenty of interviews with people where he's gave them an easy ride and nobody's batted an eyelid. We're just fans of Lowland League football at the end of the day, so you can wrap all your abuse right now like that. I mean, I know I joke every week about sending your abuse on Twitter, but that's fair game if you want to have a bit of a back and forth bit of banter. But some of the stuff that was being peddled online was absolutely garbage. And but we'll move on and we'll talk about the actual decision itself. And so just to set the scene for anyone who's been in a coma for the last 2 weeks, there was a vote in the Lowland League with the member clubs on Monday night to decide whether or not Rangers Celtic Colts would get into the Lowland League. It was voted as in favour, with 11 teams voting yes, with 5 teams rejecting it, and 1 team in Kelty, I presume, abstaining. So what will happen next? We'll go to the AGM. I think it's in a couple of weeks' time that we'll decide if that actually happens. And as Mother alluded to earlier on, it would need 3 clubs to basically change their mind in the yes vote, if you like. So what's your initial thoughts on the decision, Mother?
First thing, the fact that 11 clubs have voted for this shows that all the stuff that was peddled online, there's clearly an appetite for it from what they've been told, in direct representation from Rangers and Celtic, who both had representatives at that meeting. It's not purely a money thing as much as people dress up, because I keep seeing the $3,000 sold for $3,000 of silver peddled. Like, I'm pretty sure that $3,000 wouldn't be enough to just sell your soul for it. Like, I think from the kind of reading between the lines, because I don't actually know this, but I reckon what they're going to use that $50,000 for is potentially getting somebody on board to do marketing and such like, and help to improve the standing, the reputation, the image of the league. Even if they're just getting somebody to do that, say part-time or whatever, it just looks like it's a budget to do things better, essentially. And the clubs will probably see some monetary benefit, either directly or indirectly, if a sponsor comes in, for example. But I understand it. I understand why clubs have voted for it, and I also understand why the clubs that voted against did so as well, because most of the clubs that have said no have had fan representation that's told them that's not what the fans want, and they're doing basically what they've been told to do by their fan base. Bonnyrigg Rose, I think, have been an absolute standout approach in terms of straight away, what do you think? The fans said no, and then basically what they did at the meeting was they sat back, they didn't take part in the debate because they knew what they were going to vote already, because the fans had told them, and they put their vote in. And I think that's absolutely the right thing that they did. But obviously the clubs approached it differently, and they've been told the merits of it, the positives and negatives. They have been assured, and it has been confirmed that it is a 1-year proposal, contrary to all that nonsense. And the further proof of that has now came out, because the SFA have told the Lowland League that you must try to get back to 16 teams after next season, which means that's basically the Colts team's gone. And it makes sense that way. So I get it. I get why they've done it. It's a few more games. Even if you get another 50 fans through the door, forget the figures of 500 that are getting bandied about. Money's money at this level. You've got potentially a bit more exposure, and I can understand both sides of the coin, to be honest, for the reasons clubs have voted the way they have, but it's not the groundbreaking scandal that people think it is. It really isn't.
I'm gonna pick you up on a point a wee bit later, Mozza, but I'll wait for it. I'll keep you waiting on that one. I'm going to split this up into sort of 2 views, because I do have 2 views, as I said.
Watch that fence, Chris.
And yeah, exactly. I made it. I think I made it perfectly clear I was on the fence. But so here's where I stand with this. To begin with, as a fan, I would have voted no, and the main reason is I would still rather watch Stirling Uni versus Cumbernauld Colts over, say, a Spartans versus Celtic Colts. I also have issues with the fact that one of these Colts sides could potentially be top of the table come the end of the season, next season, and the Lowland League would have a champion and potentially second or possibly third. Now, despite what people think, the league could put forward a champion or have a champion in those positions, regardless of the Colts. And the SPFL, I don't think, can stop it. I think it's been explained to George, as he said, about the SFA. Now, I'm not against that, and that's not the reason I don't like it. I'm just against it on the principle of it that it's from a sporting point of view. I don't think a team that's maybe second or third should be winning a league title, basically. Now, I don't think the Colts will bring in massive numbers like you've mentioned, Derek, basically through the gate. However, the accusation, again, that you've mentioned, that the clubs that voted for this sold their soul for 3K is unfounded and frankly ridiculous. I mean, I think James Orr from the Cumbernauld Colts mentioned the fact that the clubs won't see this money. It's basically to secure the future of the league. I still don't believe it affects the pyramid. This is one of the things for me that I think we all agreed on in the last podcast, because no one from the tiers below has lost out if it's for one season. And I firmly believe that. The East of Scotland didn't declare a champion. And as much as they say, oh, well, that's not an excuse, it's one of the reasons, though. It's not an excuse, but it's a reason. And I think they should have, regardless of the circumstances, unless teams were getting relegated in the East of Scotland, I think they should have declared the champion. However, the argument seems to have turned to it still affects the pyramid because a Lowland League club could potentially be relegated because the Colts are in the league if the results stand. But my argument there would be the majority of the Lowland League clubs are voting for that. So it's if say the only sort of team that I would probably feel sorry for is maybe Dalbeattie because they didn't want it. But you know what I mean? If you voted for the proposal and you're fine with the terms and conditions and whatnot, where's the issue? And is it right the Old Firm Colts can effectively jump the queue? No, but we've mentioned it, and this is a key point. I think they're jumping the queue anyway, regardless of what we think. I think they'll be in the SPFL football, in the SPFL before long anyway. So one season in the Lowland League, does it really affect anything because they're jumping the queue anyway? I don't think so. But that's just my point of view from a fan's point of view.
Yeah, I think a point of clarity. If it is for 1 year, I do not feel it threatens the integrity of the pyramid. If it's longer than a year, then it very much does. So, on the assumption that they are just going to be there for a year and promotion and relegation happens as it was planned to anyway between tier 5 and 6, I don't really think there's an argument for, why didn't he just call up 2 teams for tier 6 instead of the Old Firm Colts? Because he'd be getting packed straight back out next summer. Like, it doesn't change anything like that. You could obviously say 2 teams in the Lowland might have been relegated instead, but the point's moot. Like, if this was to last longer than a year, then very, very different story.
People need to just to add on that, Moza. I think people need to move on to the fact that it's not as easy to pick a team now. There is the majority of the East of Scotland Premier teams are licensed. We've got West of Scotland teams licensed, whereas before that was potentially an issue for teams coming up. Obviously, we've seen it with the likes of Bonnyrigg, for example, who I'm sure I'll get into a wee bit later as well. But it's not easy. George said that himself on the last podcast. How do you go about picking 2 teams? You know what I mean? But there is a flip side to what I basically said. But I would like to obviously bring Ben in again and see if he's got any sort of thoughts on what's been said so far.
Yeah, well, I think obviously I look at this from a tier 6 point of view. I think obviously being involved at that level in the West, I think for me there was a lot of negativity straight off the bat from West teams, and I'm not trying to say this to be harsh, but it's not, as Moza said, it's not something we could control or have any influence in because we didn't have a seat at the table to even discuss it. So we can't get too upset about it because it doesn't affect us for 1 year because the leagues, both at tier 6 in the East and the West, didn't declare champions, like we said. And that was because we set out rules at the start of the season that said if you get to a certain point in the season, then we can have a champion. And if we didn't, it would be null and void because we knew what happened the season before when football got stopped short and we went to PPG and all that kind of stuff. And my team got kind of papped out of we weren't going to win on PPG, but you know what I mean. Talbot got the points, and they were champions of the West. So I'm sure, like for example, the West decided that they didn't want to see that happen again, so they set the stall out very early on, and it was the absolute right thing to do. Unfortunately, football didn't happen in January or stopped in January because of the worsening state of COVID. So we can't grumble because we never had a champion, because we never had a procedure in place to allow us to put a champion in place in the first place. But I feel now, instead of being negative and kind of getting upset about it on social media, I think this is our opportunity to galvanise together and push the Lowland League to get those promotion and relegation spots that we need. We've said it before, there's plenty of teams now getting licensed. We've seen, 5 or 6 teams in the West already, pretty much every team in the East. There'll be more West teams getting licensed probably for the following season. I'll use George to quote his own word, ventilation, something he talks about quite a bit. This is the opportunity to apply that pressure, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on Pie and Bovril, whether it's via the West or East committee boards, for example, via the non-professional game board, whoever it is they all sit on, and try and get that in place. It's not going to be in place for next year, but ultimately we want to get probably at least one team automatically promoted from the West, one team promoted automatically from the East, and at least 2 coming down, with potentially even a third for maybe a playoff against the second team. I don't know how that would work, but instead of getting too upset about it, let's go and try and apply that pressure, because George has been out there and he said it about the ventilation and requiring maybe more relegation spots. If he's true to his word, I'm sure that'll be something we'll discuss at some point. The AGM's in 2 weeks' time for the Lowland League. If I'm a club in the West, I want to be putting pressure on them to actually go and get the promotions and relegation that they talk about.
I agree, Ben. I actually agree with you. I do think we're at a stage. I never always agreed, but I do think we're now at the stage. I mean, we can talk about more teams getting licensed and stuff like that, but I do feel we need now at least 2. Excuse me, at least 2 automatic relegation. At the very minimum in the Lowland League, because we do have so many. I know that we use this word a lot, ambitious clubs, but yeah, there has to be something there in terms of more ventilation. And in reality, there is obviously, the Lowland League can promote relegate up to 3 clubs, but I think we need more automatic, similar to what George has said. We need to not be hypocrites in the sense that we're pushing the SPFL to get an automatic relegation and do so the same. But yeah, I agree. I think it's a good opportunity for the tiers to below. I think it's been mentioned. I think it was Kenny Young in the West of Scotland. But I'd want to see something more between all the organisations, because I think what's been lost in this is the fact that they are separate organisations, they're separate leagues, they're run by different board members. I think we need to, in the future, maybe look at something a wee bit more integrated in terms of the Lowland League, the South of Scotland, East of Scotland, West of Scotland. And that's another reason I don't subscribe to the fact that a lot of people were saying about, the money should be shared to the West of Scotland, East and South of Scotland. And I did make this point, but if the South of Scotland get a league sponsor tomorrow, where's the money going? It's just going to the South of Scotland. It's not going to any of the other leagues. So yeah, I don't subscribe to that point of view either, where it's like, it should be shared between these different leagues and organisations. It's like, it's nonsense.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, I think, to be fair, we have been pretty consistent as a podcast in saying that there should be more relegation from the Lowland as well as going up the way. And especially now, we've basically got no junior leagues left. Everyone is in the pyramid now. The West of Scotland, to their credit, are now creating a level between that level and armies as well. And that's the final piece of the puzzle. So the time has come. Simple as that. Like, I had an interesting chat with a Lowlands League club member this week. I won't say who. But in his words, he basically thinks that it'll need pressure on to get it through, because the idea of turkeys not voting for Christmas. Like, for an AGM kind of thing to come through, a proposal to come through, needs one club to propose and another club to support that. So I think it needs people to actually put the pressure on to make it happen. And I think the next stage would be 2 automatic relegation spots, potentially even skipping to getting a playoff spot in there as well, on the bottom side. But the initial move needs to go for 1 to 2, basically. in terms of standard. And the other caveats can still apply for Highland and Lowland promotions, relegations, all that jazz, to keep the league at a 16 as we go forward. But yeah, it has to. Like, to show the commitment to the pyramid, which is a phrase I keep hearing, we have to have more relegation in it. And if the clubs don't bring that in, they've got no right to ask for it for the SPFL.
Absolutely. I think that you're spot on with that, Moza. I think we're desperate to see it from Lowland League to League Two. And obviously, League Two teams are doing their very, very best to stop that from happening. I know we've seen a lot of things happen where they've even tried to stop the Club 42 playoff, you know, in that regard. And but we can't be hypocrites and fight for that, but not do it at the bottom of our own table. And there's plenty of teams there that are capable of coming up and will make that league a great league and a really competitive competition, because there's plenty of West, there's plenty of East teams there that are going to come up and are very, very capable and will probably challenge near the top of the Lowland League. So, I mean, the Lowland League's probably going to be one of the most competitive leagues in Scotland. Once most of these West and East teams can come through and some of the bottom feeders can drop out. So,
like, how many times have I said recently that BSC need to get up in the next few years, otherwise it's going to be nigh on impossible with all the good teams coming in? It's that principle. And teams in the Lowland know, there's a good half dozen teams know that their time is going to be finite at this level. They are going to drop down at some point. But shouldn't be scared of that.
I think that sort of leads into my other point of view on this Colts proposal, because I think it's important for all of non-league as a whole, and it's something that I think you've mentioned in what you've said earlier, Moza, and obviously something that George has said. But as a club, I would have voted for this proposal. And the main reason being is because if you Google Kelty Hearts right now, this is our champion club, a team that could potentially be playing in League Two next season. And one of the questions that is always associated with Kelty Hearts is, what league do they play in? Now, that tells me the vast majority of football fans in Scotland are unaware of the non-league scene. Sure, there's exceptions, particularly maybe Clydebank in the west of Scotland. Probably in relation to the Lowland League, you'd probably have East Stirlingshire and Berwick Rangers. But the question then becomes, in relation to these clubs, what happened to them? So there's still this awareness missing of the Lowland League. Now, I'm not buying into this history thing where people throw shade at the likes of Caledonian Braves or BSC, because Kelty were only founded in 1975. So clubs don't need a deep history, regardless of success, to be known, especially nowadays on social media. And I'm going to shatter a few egos here, because where we believe non-league is not at the level people think it is. It's we think it's up here, but it's actually down here. And I'll tell you why. Let's do a wee comparison. The SWPL, I would argue there is more viewership in the SWPL than there is in non-league. And I'm not talking about fans through the gate. I specifically mean exposure and viewership. With respect to both teams, if you ask people if they've heard of Glasgow City, not knowing anything about the SWPL, they'll likely know that's a women's team. If you ask about if people know Gala Ferradine Rovers, I bet less people have heard of Gala Ferradine Rovers in Glasgow City. The SPFL is on BBC Alba, BBC Sport Scotland right now. If the Colts, being in the Lowland League, can bring that sort of exposure, can bring a league sponsor and potentially a broadcast deal, the viewership will be extremely important for the future of any team below the SPFL, not just the Lowland League. There's more women teams verified on Twitter too, by the way. People will come back at me and say, oh, it's an unfair comparison because the Women's League has Rangers, Celtic, Hearts, Hibs and Motherwell. And I'll just say, well done, you've answered your own question. And regardless if you agree with what Stephen Gerrard and James Tavernier said about the Rangers Colts the other day about developing players and whatnot, it's irrelevant. With this deal, basically, we've had the biggest names in Scottish football already talking about the Lowland League, and people can't see the benefits of that. You could have the greatest product in the world, and if no one's heard of it, then it means nothing. We've had so many... I know obviously there's been negative press as well, but the fact that we have Rangers and hopefully Celtic in the future talking about the Lowland League. I think that's great for all in non-league, and I really do. And I think we've got to get past this idea that what we're progressive and all this and forward thinking, and we are. I agree, but we also need the exposure and people to find out about the Lowland League, the clubs. I mean, I've helped, and I don't want to take all the credit, but certainly when I first got involved, I had to do the Wikipedia, the transfer marks, the squads of all these teams. So that's helped improve. I think the podcast has helped improve the exposure. But what Rangers and Celtic could bring for the league is nothing. Is nothing what we can do. We can't open the doors for the Lowland League that they could in terms of their contact book and what they could bring. And I think that's why, as a club, this opportunity would have been too good to turn down for me.
Pretty strong argument, in fairness, when you look at it that way. Well, what do you reckon, Ben? I'll let you fire in for us anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris is absolutely spot on in what he's saying. I personally don't know an awful lot about the SWPL until it appeared on BBC Scotland with the turn of the season there, and it's a highlight show. I make a point of recording it and watching the games for half an hour on a Monday afternoon or Monday lunchtime or whatever. And I think you're right. I think I think the thing about it is there's potential with the Lowland League, and that's probably something that harks back to the kind of old like junior days in some of these teams where you've got a kind of can't see 3 feet in front of you because you can just firefight and do what you can do, and you're stuck in your ways in a lot of ways. So I think that's the thing. The key thing here is the potential. If for example we do get a TV deal, I know we presenting it. Spoke to George, and we're going to be in the presenting, so it's all good. Maybe be on the payroll, but then who knows? Nah, I'm joking. That's just banter. So I think if you then have a programme on, for example, I presume if we're talking TV deals, it'll be something along the lines of BBC Scotland. I don't imagine there'll be a kind of outpouring of Premier Sports, for example, coming in with a big lavish bit of dough to get us on there. And so I think that'll be a good thing because people enjoy football, so they'll probably sit and watch it if it's on at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night, highlights or whatever. I know I do that as well, so I think we've got to think about the potential they could have. I mean, if it all falls flat on its face and it's shit, then you can tell us, told you so. But I think we've got to explore the opportunities that are there at the moment.
The thing is, if it falls flat on its face, we've had a 1-year pilot and it didn't work, and nobody's lost anything. So I personally don't think we'll get a TV deal, because BBC Scotland barely shows that many championship games as it is, and you're looking at League 1, League 2 and so on. I don't think Rangers and Celtic B teams will be enough of a pool to get that many games, if any, there. However, if you're looking at clubs this year that have learned a hell of a lot about online streaming, and I include my own club in this, and obviously I'm slightly biased when it comes to us. When we streamed BSC versus East Stirlingshire, we had 300 plus watching it. If I'm going to stream BSC versus Rangers Colts, albeit to an audience that might not all be based nearby, I'd imagine we'd get 500 plus, purely because Rangers' name's involved with it. That's not necessarily the exposure that they're looking for, because Chris has quite accurately said that it's obviously the national exposure. Like, so many people still refer to junior football. They're not aware of the changes. They don't know who clubs like BSC, for example, are. We only really started getting known when the Hibs game happened on BBC, which kind of proves a point in a way. I get that argument from that side of things. I think it makes a hell of a lot of sense for, if you're looking at the league independently on its own, to get known, to therefore potentially get sponsored. If you're better known, you're going to have a better chance of getting a sponsor. The West of Scotland's got a sponsor because these clubs are known to a degree. The Junior Cup always had a sponsor because it was known. When you've got a newer competition and newer cups, they need to become known. And that, I get that side of things. But yeah, I don't think this should be seen purely through a monetary lens. And I think in that regard, Chris makes a a few really good points, but proof will be in the pudding. I don't think there'll be a TV deal, but you might see certain games broadcast, even if they're just for free online, like we've done on Twitch. You could even see, like BBC iPlayer shows tier 10 FA Cup games, just on the website. Why not have that on, just to get a wee bit of exposure that way, you know?
I think the thing.
Sorry, mate. I just to point out with the TV deal, I disagree because, in particularly about BBC Alba and BBC Sport Scotland, they're going to have games on this whole week, like throughout the week. So you're going to get your SWPL game on a Sunday on both. Then I think the Edinburgh City game is on the Monday, and then I can't remember who it is, if it's Morton or someone. It's the Championship game on Tuesday, and the rest of the week I think it's back to the SPFL on Wednesday. There's a game on Thursday. There's a game on Friday. Not sure about Saturday, but like it's pretty much the whole week they're going to have football. And if they're open to that, I know it's coming up playoff time and relegation time and promotion time, etc. But if they're open to that, I mean, BBC Sport Scotland, they're online. It's a lot easier for the likes of BBC to do something on BBC Sport Scotland than it is to actually do it on BBC Alba with the TV trucks and whatnot. So I think it is possible that we could get coverage next season.
Well, you look
it's
at
definitely possible. Yeah.
When you look at what like Model just said about what the teams have been able to do, we've seen broadcasts from a wide range of clubs in both the East and the West and Lowland League over the last 9 months or so. And the quality has been excellent. I've said it before in this podcast, that the output that some people have been able to do from kind of pretty much getting a camera and a laptop and an internet signal has been excellent. And so I think for me it's possible, and whether or not we get a live TV deal, I think even a highlights package on BBC would be still a win, and it'd be up to the BBC to. We're saying BBC like they're the done deal, but whichever TV company decides to take it on and or can take it on in the end, that basically they can lean on the people that are in the leagues already and to try and do something with them and make sure that the quality is as good as you'd expect on the TV. But I think my point I was going to jump in before Chris spoke there was just about, we said it's not obviously not to look at it from a monetary lens, but can you really begrudge some of the teams in the Lowland League if they did purely do it for money? We've had an absolute shit show of a year in terms of lost gate money for fans, hospitality, whatever else that some clubs have relied on to survive. And if, for example, the difference of having your team in the league or not was $3,000, then you're going to take the money from the Rangers and Celtic Colts deal. Let's be honest, because it might be the only money on the table at the time, and your club needs that to survive. So I think that's been a bit harsh about the kind of idea that they've been sold out or for $3,000, because let's be honest, if your team was put in a position to vote, I'd be interested to see how the other teams would vote when the money's on the table and things like that. So if you can make a few bob this year, if it's only for a season, and that helps your club in the long run because you've got $3,000 and maybe a couple of grand in the gate, then great. I hope the clubs can survive, but potentially we could be looking at clubs maybe not surviving if we didn't have this kind of money. So it's not the worst thing to happen in terms of money.
I think it says a lot when you look at the clubs that voted for it. It wasn't just your Caledonian Braves and BSC who voted for it. Berwick Rangers and East Stirlingshire voted for it. And they're both ex-league clubs that have dropped in. So I think that kind of renders a few points invalid in terms of, it's just these new clubs with no history, with no fan base. That's been bandied about a wee bit. Like, Berwick surveyed their fans and voted for it. Shire, I don't think Shire did a fan survey. I think they just voted for it on the basis of the presentation it was done, but it clearly has cut across different types of club and different sizes of club, and it's got enough support. It's not just scraped through, it's gone through pretty easily. Although I think the indications for Kelty are that they might turn into a no vote now, because their fan vote is apparently quite heavily against it for what the whispers are saying. But
I mean,
it doesn't make any difference because they were in abstain. It's basically the same as a no vote anyway. They didn't vote in favour, so I can't see it changing. I think it'll just be the same vote with Kelty saying no.
All right. Well, one of the other things I think has been mentioned briefly, and must be touched on earlier on, is the potential for a Lowland League 2. I took from what we spoke with George on Friday that I kind of got the vibe that it would be a kind of like a West East type split. But you think it's slightly different? Do you think?
I think, having listened back to it in the way it was said, I think he's talking about putting an extra level below the Lowland League. And the reason I'm coming to that conclusion is not just the way he said it, also the SFA have been really consistent on this issue, saying they want 2 feeder leagues into the SPFL. They do not want 3 feeder leagues into it, for whatever reason. Don't know why. I think it common sense, it makes sense today, Northwest East, because of the dysphoria of clubs and that, but I see it as another, not National League, another Lowland League that will act as a feeder league to basically the original Lowland League.
It's we've talked about this before. I think Colin Boyd, Kilwinning mentioned something about it. It's not a new idea. I think it's something that's been discussed way back. I think Civil Service Strollers had mentioned something about this, and this was 2 seasons ago, maybe even more. So I'm against it. I don't believe we need another tier in the bottom. I think, if anything, it's a wee bit disappointing because from what I heard about the season after the Colts is we might have had an expanded Lowland League, and that would have, for me, solved a lot of the issues with teams coming up and the lack of relegation. Because if we could have had 3 teams coming up into the Lowland League next season and kept it at 18, I think that would have solved a lot of the issues.
Yeah, definitely.
But because we're not going to get that anymore, I don't think Lowland League 2 is the answer. I really don't, and I think it's going to kind of pee off the pyramid even more. If you're saying to the west of Scotland, oh well, you're not, say for example, Clydebank won the league next season, and then all of a sudden the Lowland League 2 comes about. It's like, oh well, we're not going to put you in the Lowland League. We're going to put you in the Lowland League 2. I think they would be quite annoyed. Now they have an extra tier to jump, So yeah, I'm not for it. I don't think it's the right. This is a problem I've had. I think George has an issue. I really do believe that because I know the Lowland League. We've mentioned obviously that the clubs won't be voting. They'll tend not to vote for more relegations to save themselves, if you will, for a lack of a better term. But something needs to be done to allow these West of Scotland, East of Scotland, potentially South of Scotland teams up. And it needs more than one spot. But I don't think Lowland League 2 is the answer for me.
No, I totally agree with you. The time for Lowland League 2 was a couple of years back when the West of Scotland League didn't exist, because there weren't enough licensed clubs that could jump up to the Lowland League at that stage. And similar to what the West are doing now, offering that development league, it would essentially be in a development stage for teams to go and get their licence to then move up to the Lowland League. You don't need that now. West of Scotland teams are getting their licences. The East of Scotland Premier are almost fully licensed at this point. So the need for it's not there. There's plenty of teams in the south that are licensed as well. So the only reason that you'd have a Lowland League 2, in my opinion, is just to try and exert more influence. And that wouldn't be doing things for the right reasons, in my opinion. Just looking at it as a whole pyramid, if we're caring about non-league full stop, I don't think it's the right move. I don't think it adds anything to the pyramid. However, if it was a split into West and East, if that's possible, I would be for it. So there's different ways of looking at it, but I don't think an extra tier is the answer. And as you quite rightly say, you're basically telling West and East of Scotland clubs who have gone and shelled out their money for their licence, oh, well done, guys, but by the way, you've got an extra tier to get up now. Like, it's just, no for me.
I think the idea of the West and the East Lowland League makes a lot of sense for me personally. I think that would give the teams at the top half of the West and top half of the East probably a chance to get up a little bit quicker, probably. Yeah. But I guess it depends on what the SFA say, because they've also said they only want one feeder team at per Highland, one for the Lowland. But I guess for me, it would only the promoted team would probably come from a playoff. If you win your league, you would come from a playoff to play the team in the East or West, vice versa. So I don't see how that really impacts the SFA in that regard if it has got say 32 teams at tier 5, and half of them are on the west, half of them on the east. So
I'll tell you how it impacts. I'll tell you, because what will it be, a playoff between the East and West in the Lowland League, or will it be a round robin between the East, the West, and the Highland League? Because we've got the Highland League, it's not quite as straightforward as people think.
Yeah.
We would have to have more sets of playoffs, and obviously, I mean, I can just imagine it. For example, an East versus West team, then they have to play the Highland League champions, and then they have to go and potentially play Club 42. I mean, that's 3 sets of playoffs, which it doesn't seem like a lot, but given the fact that it's probably over a space of 2-3 weeks, that is a lot of ask for any of these teams. Over in the Lowland League, I would say, over obviously the Highland League or the Club 42.
The way around that would be to use the SPFL style of playoff with semi-finals and final. But then you'd need to convince Club 42 to play an extra playoff game. So there's always going to be these checks and balances. It is what it is. They might actually take that rather than an extra relegation, like spot coming in, automatic relegation. But the other question is, are the winners of the Highland to Lowland West to Lowland Least going to be happy with that, having to go through a semi-final and a final? I don't know. But I think long term it is the most common sense solution to the pyramid to have 3 feeder leagues into League 2 and potentially an expanded League 2 with extra relegation spots. It would need to be the answer there. However they work it out. But that's for down the road. In my opinion, we need to get our own house in order first, regardless of what the SPFL do. And if we get the permission to do 3 at this tier 5, I would go for it anyway, because it's the right thing to do. Don't worry about the SPFL, that will happen eventually, and it will happen, it will come in. Let's just make sure our side of the pyramid's sorted. And then we have every right to go to them and go, well, we're fine. Look at us, we've got a really successful, really fluid system with teams going up and down. Your balls in your court now. Get it done.
No, I think so. I think that's the right thing to do. And because we've said it before, there's plenty of teams there that are ready to come up and ready to challenge. So hopefully we'll get to that point fairly soon. Certainly within maybe 2 or 3 seasons, perhaps. Right, moving on. You, Chris.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just before we, I need to pick up a point that Moza made earlier, because I disagree with him, and I think he gave too much credit to one team in particular, who I'm now about to criticise in a sense, to be honest. And I'm glad you got that sort of wee soundbite out about Berwick, because it is true, and I do feel you were a wee bit, I don't want to say biased, but you gave one team credit for going out to their fans. But let's just talk about this, right? So obviously, I have a few issues with Bonnyrigg Rose's approach. I thought their statement was excellent. That goes without saying. I think most of the statements that they put out are excellent. However, I think they forgot the key phrase, I guess. Work for yourself, but not by yourself. I feel they in some of their statements they selectively, I guess, missed out a few things that they have done in the past, and one of them being there was no mention of George Fraser helping them out get into the Lowland League, and I think they selectively forgot that, and it's not the first time. There's been a few times they've done that. Now, going into a point, there was a few other things, and I think they had 3 statements out that they mentioned, and I just don't believe they never came up in the meeting. And I know earlier you were saying that they were kind of staying out because they knew what they were doing, but there was certain things in there that I think they were being a wee bit disingenuous, because these are things that we talked to George about, and I just don't believe that they never came up in the meeting. And I think it's fair to criticise them for that, because they were, in my opinion, and they weren't the only club to do this, but I thought they were overly pandering to the East of Scotland. Now, if you look at it, they were in the East of Scotland for, I think, season. They've been in the Lowland League for 2 seasons. So for me, I'm thinking, well, why are they so pandering? Is it because they accept the decision or they're against the decision? Obviously, in this instance, they're against the decision. But The one thing I didn't like is I thought, in a sense, it stabbed George in the back. And it's okay to have concerns about these certain things. I've heard, obviously, Robbie Horns had a few articles, and I agree with him. I have similar concerns with what he said. And it's okay to have concerns. But for me, I think some of the things they said were a wee bit disingenuous. The fact that certain things weren't mentioned. And to get back to your point you made earlier, they weren't the only club to reach out to their fans. And I think people came across as, Bonnyrigg doing the great thing. Berwick Rangers went out to the fans and they voted yes. Caledonian Braves reached out to the fans, they voted yes. It came across as a wee bit, certainly in their later statements, they came across as a sort of people's club, which I like. I totally understand. As a community club, great. But why not have a mention of Berwick and Caledonian Braves? It's a democracy.
Because it doesn't suit people's narrative for...
Yeah, and that's why I'm criticising them.
Yes.
That's why I'm criticising them. But also, hold on.
That's not Bonnyrig's fault, though. That's people who are against the Colts who are using Bonnyrigg as the bastion.
It was their own words.
Use Berwick.
Derek, I disagree because it was Bonnyrigg's own words from their statements, and that's why we're having this discussion. But I think not mentioning George, what they done, and being over-pandering is, I don't think there was an excuse for that.
I agree with what you're saying on the Lowland side because, well, remember we basically drummed up a campaign to get them in, and it was a wee bit awkward because I felt as if Whitehill Welfare were going to hate us at that point.
They still do, I think.
Because we were basically saying get them out of the league, get Rose in, but it was the right thing to argue for. We've been consistent on that as well with Boness. We campaigned to get them in, and the Lowland have proven their commitment in that way of getting teams up when they deserve to come up. But yeah, I personally think Bonnyrigg have handled it really well. I think Berwick have handled it well. That's why I mentioned them as well, to give that contrary perspective when they voted yes. I've noticed a few conspiracy theories about they've diddled the votes with the fans groups and that, but they've literally dealt directly with the supporters trust to help get this over the line, and they have overall voted yes as a fan base. The one criticism you could throw at Bonnyrigg, I think, would be, well, why have they not engaged with it? If they have sat back, just listened to it and put their vote in for no, why haven't
they shouldn't have any concerns
for that chat? Yeah,
they shouldn't have any concerns. That's
but the impression they gave from their statement was they basically sat on their hands, let the discussion flow freely, and then put the vote in because the fans have told them what to vote. But the question is, was there information in there that the fans didn't have? And would that change things?
And one reason also why I want to criticise them, and I know a lot of people will be, he's only criticising them because they voted no, which is nonsense, because I would have also voted no as a fan. So the reason I'm criticising them, because I thought, obviously I've said, but I think there's this perception that we're all nicey with our own clubs in the Lowland League when we covered it. It's far from the truth. We've criticised Bonnyrigg before, we've criticised Kelty, we've criticised East Kilbride a lot, to be honest, for East Kilbride. But and I think we'll before we're ending, we're obviously going to have a wee comment on East Kilbride. But look, it's the thing that I didn't like about it is the fact that some people are comparing George Fraser to Neil Doncaster. And I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding here? There's been two issues which could call into question sporting integrity. And they've both been recently. And funny enough, both affected Bonnyrigg Rose. This Colts proposal, which they've obviously not been for, and declaring Kelty Hearts champions this season, which the argument against that is there wouldn't have been playoffs because they changed the goalposts. It had to be done. However, again, we're not the Gestapo, we're not propaganda. We'll call out our own teams. I just think it was we've talked about disappointment and being disappointed in people. I have a huge respect for Bonnyrigg Rose, despite what people think. And I'm actually, if we're talking a wee bit, in probably a few minutes, I'm going to praise them again. So, I just was a wee bit disappointed that I thought it was relevant in what they were saying, but they failed to mention it. And there were certain things that I feel would have been answered because we heard about them on the podcast that they had these sort of concerns over, which I just can't get my head around that George would mention something on a podcast but not mention it to member clubs, and they've brought something up. And that's what I can't get my head around. I was disappointed. I again go back to the fact that I thought it was an excellent statement, but there was a few concerns in there for me.
The bit I don't get about the Bonnyrigg situation there, they're saying they basically sat on their hands and didn't discuss it. See, if you felt so strongly, or your fans felt so strongly about the idea of no Colts, why are you not going into that meeting and trying to bat for the people that are going to vote no and try and perhaps persuade the other teams that are maybe havering on the fence and undecided until they make their vote? I would be, if that was me, for example, in my workplace, and I felt strongly about a situation that someone else felt differently about, and there's a group of us that felt strongly by my side, we would go into bat together and make sure that we come out of that with the situation that suits us the best. And I don't understand why they would just sit back and let it all unfold. And
to be fair, they could have done that. They could have done that. We're relying on one testimony here that might not be accurate. So it's one of these things.
Did you guys not hear what I said in the beginning? The phrase "work for yourself, but not by yourself." That, to me, is the issue. You know, the clubs are obviously doing their own thing, but at the end of the day, you're part of a bigger picture of the league. And sometimes I feel Bonnyrigg, and there's other clubs as well, but Bonnyrigg seem to alienate themselves from others. I think there's maybe Dalbeattie Star have kind of done that a lot lately. Not so much with the Colts issue, but certainly, back when when the plane stopped, basically. But yeah, I think that's the takeaway from that. And I don't want to criticise them, but I do feel they missed out relevant things to make which to me, I think it diminishes their argument. If you're arguing for something and you don't mention a certain section or something that probably was answered, but you're kind of, again, I feel being disingenuous about it, then it's not they've not put a strong case forward for me, basically, and that's why I'm taking this time to point that out to people.
All right, moving on then. One of the other bits of news we've seen recently is that there's 9 new teams in the west of Scotland. We've got St Peters, Harthill, Harmony Row, Kilsyth Athletic, Finnart, Glenvale, Campbelltown Pupils, Westerton United, and Broomhill Sports Club. So great to see teams, new teams join the west. They've also put in this kind of development league at what they're calling, I think, Division 4, where teams maybe not quite got the kind of the ground criteria and stuff like that in place for playing in the west of Scotland, but it gives them a chance to do that and kind of give them a couple of years to potentially go out and do that. So I think a great move by the West Scotland board and to bring some teams in, because some of those teams they're good kind of youth setups. They've got a good pathway of kids coming through and stuff like that. So very, very interested to see how that develops.
I think it's fantastic. I think it's one of the best things that's happened in the last couple of years, pyramid-wise, because like I went into it earlier on, you're given that stepping stone for armies into the leagues now, and that is the final bit of a fully functioning pyramid. And we've only just got pretty much every area of Scotland covered now in the pyramid. If every league can get that step at the bottom level, and I fully expect the East to follow suit now, to be honest, it's common sense again, but it's great because clubs like St Peters, I'm very, very interested to see how they do. Seem to have everything ready to rumble, seem pretty switched on guys behind the scenes. Obviously, Harthill's slightly different. But yeah, it's just a positive step to get more inclusion and more representation in the leagues. And I've only got good things to say about it.
It goes against sport integrity because the member votes didn't get a vote. And I'd seen a few people saying, "Oh, why didn't the member clubs get a vote and stuff like that?" I honestly think it's a good thing. And to be honest, I don't know the background, but it just comes to a point where I think people argue anything on Twitter just for the sake of an argument. I mean, how can you be mad about Harmony Row and these teams coming in? I know they're only, I think, associate members and stuff like that, but I think it's a good move as well, and it's good to see a development type division within the west of Scotland. I think they already sort of exist in the east of Scotland, to be honest, with certain clubs, but I'm for it. But I did think it was a wee bit funny how suddenly the west of Scotland was then getting a wee bit of stick from the back of this. But I mean, it's just mental what people say on social media and get angry about, I think.
Let's face it, we're all excited for Campbelltown away, man. That's going to be some day out of that.
The amount of times that we kind of put a wee nod and a wink towards them coming in is everyone seemed to think we were talking about Oban. But don't get me wrong, Oban, if you're watching, please join next year. Please. Rossi as well. But
I mean,
we'll need to get a day out of Campbelltown at some point, won't we?
I mean, that's the thing. We mentioned Oban and Rossi, etc. The other things that Brandy and Bill's their main side is. Who knows, man? Like that bottom tier of the west of Scotland is right there for them to come in if they want to come in and become a West Scotland team. There's nothing stopping them now. So, man, we're all for good away days. So let's get. I was actually looking on the map today trying to work out how you get to Campbelltown for a away day, but it turns out I can get a boat for my Drawson, so that'll be interesting.
I mean, one to keep an eye on in terms of next year. I'd imagine Glasgow Wellington might be having a wee look at it. A kind of progressive, social media driven club like that. That's a perfect natural next step for them.
100%. Right, okay, let's get talking about the actual football in the park. One of the games, Muzzle, you were at it on Saturday, Kelty against Brora. Kelty winning 4-1 and went through to the playoff with League 2 on 6-1 aggregate. How was the game?
Aye, it was good. There's not much to say, to be honest. It was a horrendous day weather-wise. God love the folk that were standing in the school absolutely drenched watching for there, but
no comment.
Kelty were just quite happy to stay compact, hitting the break. The game changed when Brora scored because suddenly Kelty get a kick up the arse. Within 2 minutes, ball over the top, Nathan Austin 1-1, game over, essentially, because that knocked a lot of the stuff in it of Brora at that point. And Kelty they never really got out of second gear, but they had more than enough. I'm genuinely very surprised that there was that much between the sides because we'd built it up as one of the closest playoffs it was going to be. But there's a few things. Brora only travelled down by car on the day. Kelty did it by staying overnight the game before. The night before, I should say. So I feel like Kelty's prep was probably better for it. They've obviously played more games as well. Brora's only had their few games plus a couple of cup games. But ultimately, I think Kelty have had great prep now for the breaking games coming up, and I fully expect them to go and win over the 2 legs and become an SPFL club.
I was quite disappointed in Brora, and I think the manager was too. I did read an article basically said we've played Stranraer, we've played Kelty, we're still far away given the results. I don't think they played that bad. I just think they weren't clinical enough. It's like there was some chances they had, especially the first game, but it's like they didn't have their shooting boots on. It's like they were missing that something in the final third up front. Yeah.
They're missing sharpness.
And I don't think there is much. I thought the manager, I can't remember his name, unfortunately, but the Brora manager I think he was right, but I still don't believe they're that far away. I just think because of the circumstances, they weren't, like you said, Moza, that as match sharp, and I was actually surprised at how match sharp Kelty were compared to Brora, and I think that for me that was the difference. And both teams, it's not like both teams don't know how to win, certainly. So I think that whatever Kelty were doing in terms of getting their match fitness ready before the game, I think it was probably a wee bit better than Brora's, I guess, given how both teams played and the result.
I mean, let's not beat around the bush. That's not a hedge pun, by the way. There's 2 big differences, and there's a reason that Kelty are the favourites, and it's Austin and Easton. And the 2 of them could easily be League 1 level. The fact that Austin went on loan to League 1 level and scored goals again before he came back to Kelty, that's the big difference between Kelty and other sides of this out.
Yeah, I agree. I've not seen a lot of Kelty play, but I certainly watched both the games and Tuesday and Saturday, and I feel like that about Austin and Easton. Austin's a cheat code as far as I'm concerned. He's unreal. Absolutely, that's like unreal. And Easton, very similar, great player. Very, very impressed with what I've seen, and I'm sure they'll do well against Brecon. I don't expect them to be I think it'll be closer certainly, but I think I still think Kelty will still win that game easily and probably go into that league too and be quite competitive next season. All right, next topic of agenda is BSC. New manager Martin Hardy came in place on Saturday. Muzza, how do you feel?
Pretty happy, to be honest. From the discussion I had with George about Martin, it seems that he's a pretty positive guy who's got a very similar mindset to what Swifty had in terms of the style of football he wants to play, the culture he wants to build, and I think we needed that continuity there, so I'm happy with that. We've just announced Xander Diamond as the assistant manager as well. Martin and Xander are related, so they're well aware of each other already. I know Xander actually interviewed for the main job, but he's happy to come in as number 2 at this point and building his experience. So it's going to come down to the squad ultimately, because we're losing 5 bodies to Stenhousemuir. I don't know if I'm allowed to say names, so I'll not say names.
Yeah,
is that exclusive?
Our squad is getting weakened considerably, and it'll come down to who stays around and who gets brought in. And we'll see what happens on that front, but that'll be the big difference between whether we're able to get in the hunt again, not necessarily to win the league, but to challenge, or whether we're going to go back down to mid-table, which is what we were before Swifty came in. A lot of people forget that. We were 7th, 8th place generally, so we do have a South Challenge Cup game, a final still to play at some point for 2 years ago when that comes in, but we'll see how recruitment goes, because it's not actually that long when you look at it until the season comes through. So we've got 2 months to get moving.
There's certainly a lot of squad building required, isn't there? But the fact that you had a few guys on loan from West Scotland teams who obviously made that team a lot better for having those guys in the squad as well. So you've got those guys to replace, plus the guys that you're probably going to lose. Anyway, obviously you're from your defence, Ross Smith has joined my team, Colin Rangers. So I'm looking forward to seeing Ross, and I've only ever heard great things about him, and I'm looking forward to. I had a quick chat with him last week, and seems like a really nice guy and really up for it in terms of what we're doing here at co-winning. So I'm excited to see what Ross does, but there'll be more guys I presume going out the door as well. So Martin Hardy's got a big job in his hands to build that squad for the new season.
It'll be interesting to see how he does it, kind of the blend of youth experience, because we've generally done really well with that balance the last few years. We've still got guys that I don't know if they're going to still be with us, like Andy Geoghegan, for example. Martin Green came back to us. So we've still got those experienced heads that may or may not hang around for another season. We'll wait and see how Martin approaches it. But Ross Smith's a crack signing for co-winning. He's one of the most honest defenders you're going to find. He's a good lad as well. And to be fair, I can understand why he's going, because he's got a bit of security. He's is it 3 years that he's basically committed to the Buffs? So he's done the right thing by him, and good luck to him, because he's a great lad. He'll do well for you.
I don't know much about Hardy, to be honest, but I think Xander Diamond's an interesting one, because you were saying about experience in youth. Obviously, he was a youth coach at Queen's Park for 18 months before this, so that sort of interests me. But yeah, it was a bit of when I first looked at it, I was like, Xander Diamond, I've not heard of him in ages, probably since he was last playing at Aberdeen or something. I don't know. But I was it caught me off guard a wee bit with that appointment. But
final topic then of the evening, East Kilbride. We've seen a few comings and goings at East Kilbride, Chris.
Yeah, a lot of the, I guess, the old guard, if you want to call them, leaving. Matt McGinley, Paul Woods left recently. Obviously, before that we had Sean Winter. I do feel a wee bit kind of sorry for these guys, because these are guys that I think Paul Woods spoke to Paul Thompson. There was an article out, basically he wanted to finish his career at East Kilbride. I don't think Paul Woods was getting, I don't think he was first team anymore, but I do think it's quite important to have these sort of players that will run through walls for you, that are heart and souls of your team, whether or not you think they're good enough, if you know, for lack of a better term. I do think Paul Woods still has some merit and ability, and I think he will get offers. But I do question the approach by Stephen Aitken by letting some of these guys go because, and this is where I'm going to praise Bonnyrigg. I think Bonnyrigg have the right idea where you do need certain players like Dean Brett. Jonathan Brown's sadly retired now, but them sort of players that will give their heart and soul to the club, that want to play for the club. It's more than, and I'm not denying the commitment of some of the guys that have joined East Kilbride, but you want guys that the workhorses rather than the mercenaries. I would say. I mean, you want guys that care about the club more than the wages, for again a lack of a better term. So I would question him on that. I would question the approach by East Kilbride at the moment.
It's a curious one because he's clearly still good enough to play at this level.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me to see him pitch up with us, or for us to at least make an offer to him. But it feels like a wee bit of the soul East Kilbride's gone. With Sean Winter, we would say, with Matt McGinley, these kind of guys haven't moved on because these were the guys that were a major part of them being so successful a few years back. Kind of even looking back to the Martin Lachlan days, those kind of things. But yeah, he's clearly got players in mind if he's letting somebody like Paul Woods walk, and the full knowledge that he could pitch up somewhere else and sign somewhere else. So I'm very intrigued to see what East Kilbride's squad's going to look like, whether they're going to rely again on bringing in guys who are older, experienced pros, which they relied on last year, because it didn't always work out. You look at Craig Reid, who didn't hang about very long before he moved on to Kelty and so on. So we'll see if they change tact a wee bit and maybe go a bit younger squad-wise this time, which on the face of it, this kind of looks like what they might be looking to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, they'll be looking to challenge next season and get that promotion spot for getting to the playoffs, certainly. So you'd imagine they must have something up their sleeve in terms of players. Yeah. I wouldn't imagine they're letting these kind of guys go without having presumably better players, because I think that'll be important for me. You don't want to just bring in people that are going to fill your depth. You want to have guys that are going to improve your team in the areas where you need to improve. So they must have something on the line. So
the fact they never even made him an offer, I think, is very interesting.
Unless they're skint, I guess that's the other thing, isn't it? Unless they're skint, and
that's true. We won't know that until the season starts, if they've got 15 bodies.
That's it. So we'll watch this space and we'll keep you updated if anything does change. But I mean, that's pretty much it for this week on the official catch-up. If you want to catch Mozza, where do they find you?
At Mozza Plays on Twitter, and you'll find me everywhere else through that. That's the easiest way to do it, Chris.
At Rampant FM, please don't send me square goal abuse unless you do want to meet in a time and place, I guess. No. I shouldn't say that, to be honest, because there will be someone.
I was going to say you're just encouraging it. Technically, the only person that hasn't had it is Ben. So,
what I'll do, Ben, for you, I'll create a fake account today, and then I'll send you some abuse. No, I'm like,
you think you're buff, do you?
I don't even know if he's just froze there, but he seems to.
I think his camera's froze, but it's froze at a perfect point.
Anyway, you can get me at Rampant FM or the official catch-ups at official catch-up or Lowland League catch-up on Facebook, and Google. Sorry, I'm still laughing at Ben's camera.
Frozen picture is glorious, isn't it?
And you can find Ben Grant at Mr. Ben Grant, because I don't know if he'll be back. But we'll obviously a shout out to our sponsors, the Soccer Shop Direct.
For all your sportswear, teamwear and equipment needs, especially now that, albeit not in Glasgow or Moray, the football's properly back. So with that, we'll bid you farewell and behave yourselves, for Christ's sake. We'll see you next time.